Welcome to The Outlet, an NBA podcast hosted by Nick Fay and Kory Waldron.
On this episode of The Outlet, Kory and I are joined by Jac Manuell to continue our top 25 unrestricted free agents. As always, you can catch The Outlet on all streaming platforms. Enjoy the show. Montrezl Harrell coming in at number 5. Thoughts on him? Obviously, postseason wasn't amazing for him and the Clippers. How are we feeling about his game and what he can do in this offseason?
Yeah, skeptical, but at the same time, we talked about Jeremy Grant on the last episode about, him earning himself a lot more money. Montrezl obviously lost himself a lot more money, but the regular season has to count for something, surely, because he was awesome. He was the sixth man of the year, hustle player of the year, or whatever award that was, I think, that he got as well. That doesn't necessarily get you extra money and incentives on the contracts, I don't think. It's not like an All-NBA. But I still think that based off what he did in the regular season, there is value for what Montrezl Harrell can bring to a team. Obviously, he provides great hustle, great energy, really good offensive player in a lot of ways, good rebounder. He just does all the right things. The pick and roll combo with him and Lou Williams, obviously can be attacked on the other end of the floor, but is really dynamic and absolutely explosive on the offensive end of the floor. It's going to be, I'm actually probably more thinking that Steve Ballmer leans into keeping him. And while we're a little bit lower on him here, we did have him ranked number 5 for a reason, because we didn't want to overreact to anything massive that happened in the postseason. Obviously, there are a lot of circumstances that affected his play personally, including fitness, including probably mental well-being with the passing of his grandmother as well, and having to deal with that, and just the whole vibe that affected the Clippers in general. So I think we don't necessarily give him a pass for it, because I'm still skeptical of Montrezl as a guy who can close games in the NBA playoffs and in the NBA finals, which is what the Clippers will be hoping he can do. But he is still a tremendously valuable player in today's NBA.
All right, so I'm up.
Next clicking, let's go.
Right, so I would take Jeremy Grant and Serge Ibaka over Montrezl Harrell if I'm looking at building a contending roster in the first place. So let's just put that out there, because I think they contribute more to actually winning basketball games on both ends of the floors than Montrezl Harrell does. Now, Montrezl Harrell was sixth man of the year, and he was fantastic off the bench. He provides tenacity on the boards, like you mentioned, Jack. Very good around the rim, great alley-ooper. Brings energy and hustle, and you love that from a player. But is he just Kenneth Fried? Like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if Kenneth Fried came around 4 years later, then this is Kenneth Fried, maybe, not Montrezl Harrell. I think Montrezl Harrell is really good, again. But the amount of money he's going to demand on the market now after winning sixth man of the year, I don't think is going to correlate with the actual impact he brings to winning an NBA title, which is what the Clippers' aspirations are, which they came up short, drastically short this past season.
And he was one of the reasons why.
What?
And he was one of the reasons why.
He was one of the big reasons why, exactly, because, again, they already didn't have a great center in Zubac. They brought in Joakim Noah, who I definitely thought was going to have an impact. He did nothing. And then Montrezl Harrell, he's just undersized and he's just not a very good defender. Like, he can provide some blocks at times, but he's not providing great paint defense.
Yeah.
So again, I think Montrezl Harrell is very talented. He is a sixth man of the year. He deserves to be in the top 5 when it comes to the free agency market that we're looking at. But when it comes to being a key part of a contender, I don't see Montrezl Harrell being that guy. So I almost lean towards maybe the Clippers try to do a sign and trade. But I have a hard time believing they're going to pay this man big time money going into next year. I have a hard time buying that, especially with how short they came up, because they're probably not going to flip Paul George, even though guys like Shaquille O'Neal think they should.
Yeah, Shaq's had a really great day in the news. But Montrezl Harrell, looking at him, and I think a key word we've had a lot during this free agency list has been plug and play. Looking at how guys can fit in different systems and be effective and still have a really good impact on winning. And I think Montrezl Harrell's a guy where his fit is in question, because he's really kind of a small ball 5, but he doesn't play enough defense to let you feel confident keeping him on the full floor in the fourth quarter. And really, he's better at the 4 because you could probably hide him, but you would need a stretch 5 to play him at that position, a la Miles Turner or somebody like that, because that's where you would get the best of him, because you want him to be by the rim, but he has no business guarding bigger guys. We saw Jokic work him. We saw even in the series before, Bojan Marjanovic work him. So, having these different guys being able to work a guy who's supposed to be one of your quote-unquote top 5 players in your team, I think that gives you less confidence. So, I agree. I'm not sure what's going to happen with his contract situation. If I was Montrezl Harrell, I might elect to sign a 1-year deal. Obviously, you want to cash out, but maybe you just wait until the next offseason and see where maybe you could get a better deal, unless the Clippers are giving you something. But I wouldn't feel super confident that the Clippers are going to offer him a big deal because they fired Doc Rivers. And Doc Rivers got fired because I think one of the big bad decisions he made was leaning too much on Lou Will and leaning too much on Harrell, because both guys are so bad defensively, and there was other pieces on the roster they could have played in that series and had a lot of success, and they didn't do it. I would have liked to see Jermichael Green a lot more. I know I'm kind of a stand for him, but he's a guy that just makes a lot of sense in a role player role. And Montrez, just the lack of defense just hurts him so much. Could you see any other teams make an attempt at him? Maybe Charlotte?
Yeah, I could. Charlotte is one, obviously. I think that if Detroit were to lose Christian Wood and Hayward to go somewhere in unrestricted free agency, they wouldn't have a center really on their roster. And Montrezl Harrell, you could certainly do worse.
They wouldn't have much talent either, so.
Yeah, and Montrezl Harrell would enjoy sort of being the guy in a system, obviously in a city, and, reunite with Blake. Were they on the team at the same time at any point? I can't actually remember. Don't think so.
He was traded after Blake left, I believe.
There we go.
Because he was drafted by Houston.
Yeah.
But while you guys are sort of chatting and Kory brought up the Kenneth Fried comparison, Kenneth Fried signed a 4-year, $50 million bloated deal with the Denver Nuggets. That deal actually kind of makes a lot of sense for a guy like Montrezl Harrell. You look at what Jusuf Nurkic, didn't he sign for $448 or something like that?
Yeah, his contract is a major steal.
It is. And $450, I think, would be maybe a little bit overs. I think, a six-man of the year, Lou Williams, when he signed the 4-year, $32 million deal, basically the mid-level exception, we're all like, man, that's a steal. Now, obviously, he can't do a lot of things, but if you are a fifth starter, a sixth, seventh man in the rotation, $10 to $12 million is at value. It's not to say, if it's anything 14 or above, then you're certainly worrisome about what's sort of going to be done. Maybe the executive of the year, Lawrence Frank, now he's got to put in his work.
Now, just thinking about teams that could use Montrezl Harrell, again, this doesn't work cap-wise, but Minnesota would be a team I think would somewhat work because Towns could stretch the floor for him. You mentioned Detroit. I think that's a solid team as well. It almost feels like if Cleveland missed out on Drummond and didn't bring back Tristan, maybe they would throw money at Montrezl Harrell. But, maybe the Kings want another forward. There aren't that many places for Montrezl Harrell, unfortunately, if the Clippers don't want him, that are winning situations at least.
Yeah, it's a really intriguing situation for Harrell. And like Jack mentioned, with the whole cap situation, the contract he's going to get, I feel like he probably wants more than that. He probably wants to be in the teens in terms of, hey, I just won 6 Man of the Year. I'm entering the prime of my career. I haven't had a big paycheck yet. I just came off a restricted free agency where you signed me on a smaller end deal and no one offered me an offer sheet. I feel like he's going to probably be trying to push to get some money, be it from the Clippers, be it from one of these bad teams. I don't really know, but it is a weird situation given that he had such a great regular season, but due to circumstances, the postseason was a real struggle, like Jack said. And it's just so recency bias that you're going to automatically think that about him. But given the circumstances, like Jack said, not being in the bubble, conditioning was definitely off. When we saw him return, I'm not even going to lie, he looked overweight, he looked a little fat. And for a guy that plays with energy and hustle, it's just he wasn't able to be on the court. And Jack mentioned losing his grandmother, who was very close to him. I mentioned dealing with some mental illness. So all those factors kind of plug into different things. And he definitely wasn't himself, I think, in the postseason. Obviously, defensively, he has his issues, but he could have been a better player if maybe the circumstances were a little bit more in his favor.
Now, question for both of you guys. Do you think that him being one of the disgruntled Los Angeles Clippers when it comes to how Kawhi Leonard approached the season and load management, do you think that has any impact on whether or not the Clippers want to bring him back?
Yes.
To an extent, I think the hiring of Ty Lue He sort of said on The Jump recently that, he wants to get everyone together. He wants to do more sort of camaraderie things. We saw in the preseason last year, those guys sort of head to Hawaii, have a lot of fun over there. I would assume that there's some team bonding stuff could fix a lot of different things. But, like Kory, like you sort of alluded to there, Montrezl was one of the guys that came out and sort of, said to the media, this chemistry is off. It's whack. It's just not there. So I think that I think if we do see him leave, it wouldn't surprise me if that was one of the contributing factors.
Yeah, I think they would probably look to move one of the three of those guys. You know what I mean? There was Pat Bev, Lou Will, and Montrezl Harrell. I think one of them will probably be gone next season. But I just had to make a guess. There's no guarantee, but moving on from Montrezl Harrell, we're going to number 4. We got Gordon Hayward, another guy who's had a really tough stretch. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, came back this year in the regular season, looked really good, and then in the postseason dealt with that ankle sprain. And then when he came back, there wasn't necessarily enough time for him to get back in groove. Thoughts on Hayward, and obviously as that player option, which I think we're all assuming he's going to accept.
Yeah, if he doesn't, it would be incredibly surprising. But I don't know. I don't know how excited Celtics fans are about Gordon Hayward next season. They're probably about as excited as Gordon Hayward is about.
They're excited to put him in the trade machine.
Yeah, probably excited as he is to have another daughter. It seems like he's bought about 5 of them now or something, or maybe he's having a boy. I can't remember.
He just had a boy. Yeah, I think he's finally got a boy. Yeah.
There we go. He's happy now. Daddy's happy, as he likes to say. But
that was a little creepy, but
that's how he said it on the Instagram. Go check the video. I'm not being a creep here. With the long hair out, it's not a good look. But
I had to get you back for all the pronunciation things. So
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I flamed you guys on the last episode. In terms of what Gordon Hayward can provide the Celtics, when he is capable, he has just such a well-rounded offensive and defensive skill set that it's just like he does so much in respect to he can pass, he can defend, he can shoot the three, he can create, he can do so many different things. But what version of that are they going to be getting in the 2020-2021 season? Apparently it is going to be, we have to say that a couple of times. But in taking it all into account, I still think that there is the old, or at least a semblance of the old Gordon Hayward in there. Given a decent run at it, heading into having at least a semi-decent preseason and having some semblance of health for the regular season before, the Boston Celtics will have championship aspirations with another year under their belts with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I think Gordon Hayward, we've sort of talked about plug and play as being a sort of key, a key theme of this free agents series. Gordon Hayward should be that perfect guy, and at least for next season, and you get his contract off your books going forward, and then you can do whatever. But for one season, Gordon Hayward can prove himself, and he can be the perfect complementary piece that the Celtics lack a playmaker. They really lack a floor general. Maybe that's Gordon Hayward's role next season. Maybe he turns into a sort of faux point guard for them in a lot of respects. But I've still got a little bit of hope in there for Gordon Hayward and for Celtics fans, I guess, at least in the short term.
Gordon Hayward was fantastic this year. Injuries aside, obviously he got hurt at an inopportune time and he never got back to being healthy. But Gordon Hayward matched his career high in true shooting percentage at 59.5%. Had good shooting splits throughout the season. And surprisingly enough, Gordon Hayward is way more impactful than you realize because there are bigger names ahead of him now in this roster in terms of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, who blossomed, Kemba Walker. Gordon Hayward was the 4th offensive option for this team. But when you look at, shooting numbers, for example, he shot 39% on corner threes. He shot a career best 75% around the rim and within 3 feet. All the mid-ranges were above 45%. Gordon Hayward had a tremendous year, very good facilitator, actually an underrated facilitator, not a bad system defender by any means. The simple thing is, can he stay healthy for a duration of a season and be healthy when you need him the most? And unfortunately, this year for the Celtics, that wasn't the case. Because I think if Gordon Hayward was healthy in that Miami Heat series, I don't know necessarily if the Celtics win because there were some other issues. Obviously, no one could limit Bam Adebayo, who had a tremendous series. Jason Tatum couldn't get his offense going until the second half of any of those games. But I think Gordon Hayward still has good basketball ahead of him. Whether or not it's with the Celtics, do they trade him? I know that there's been a lot of rumors from the Indiana Pacers, for example, in which the Pacers have interest in a guy like Gordon Hayward. Now, could there be a Gordon Hayward, Miles Turner deal, a basic principle around those two players exchange? Possibly. It could fit two issues for both sides. But I think Gordon Hayward definitely still has good basketball ahead of him. I do not expect him to decline that massive player option of his. For me, it's just about him being healthy because he was very good this year after that serious, ankle injury we saw, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, he just has some really bad luck with the injury stuff. It doesn't even feel like they're just like normal injuries. It's like stepping on someone's foot or just landing the weird way. Or what was it the season before? He smacked somebody and broke his hand. Like, it's just all different types of stuff that just...
Against the Pacers, I think, funny enough, the ball went off his finger, and I think it bent his finger back.
Yeah, so, just small things like that. And that's almost like some of it's maybe he's a little injury prone, but some of it's just like really bad luck. And I feel like Gordon Hayward has accepted the role of being that fourth option. And you mentioned some of the efficiency numbers, Kory. Like, he's understood what he needs to do in that Celtics offense. And like you said, Jack, I think being that secondary playmaker, and I honestly think if he was healthy, I think they would have beat Miami. They might have even beat Miami in 6 games just because of what he provides for that team. And defensively, he's a solid defender too. And I think he would have been a guy that would have helped them attack that zone a little bit better, but we'll save that for another day. But Hayward's going to probably be in Boston, at least in terms of accepting that player option. If he's traded, he's traded. But he's a guy that probably could be your third star. Like, let's hypothetically say if, he was on the Lakers, that'd be a perfect fit next to Anthony Davis and LeBron James because he's okay not having the ball a ton. He's okay just picking his spots and being that guy and understanding where he can still have success and understanding that, he's not the same player he was prior to the ankle injury.
Right. Yeah, he's gonna lessen the load of Jason Tatum next season because we saw him the burden on him in the postseason. While he did continue to put up numbers, the efficiency wasn't there, and because Gordon Hayward wasn't at his best, he couldn't necessarily default to him in any sort of situation.
Yeah, I'd like to see, what Hayward could do next season, and maybe if being traded, maybe he's on the Pacers, maybe he has a great season. But other thoughts on him before we move to number 3?
I'm not advocating for him to go to the Pacers. I want to clear the air on that for any Pacers fans watching. I'm not advocating it. Do not trade Miles Turner to make the Celtics better. Please don't do it.
All right, moving on from there, we have DeMar DeRozan at number 3, and if I'm not mistaken, another guy with a player option.
Correct.
Yep, and apparently he hates
San Antonio.
Well, so let's clarify this too, because this was another one of those like Serge Ibaka situations. It came out that DeMar DeRozan does not like San Antonio and is unhappy, and then DeMar DeRozan posted on his Instagram story, "When the hell did I say that?" So another one of those things where, was it just a rumor? Did he actually say it? Now he's trying to do a PR stunt. But again, it makes it more interesting because, do we anticipate him to accept that player option? If he wants money, yes. But if he wants to win, probably not.
And if he really does hate San Antonio, then he won't accept it either. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't like the situation you're in, you want to be out, you want a new job.
I did see a good point somebody made, though, not to hop in, Jack, that someone said, like, him wanting to leave a mid-range focused offense would be the worst decision of his life, which, Jack, dive in.
Yeah, it seems to me that the direction San Antonio is going now, it's Derek White, it's DeJounte Murray, it's Lonnie Walker, these sort of guys. And, DeMar DeRozan playing the 4 was pretty effective.
Which is so weird.
I'm all for doing weird and wacky stuff. I don't know if it works in the regular season with the healthy LaMarcus Aldridge, but in saying that, why not? We've spoken about Jakob Poeltl, who I think is, if anyone, maybe more likely to be on San Antonio than DeMar DeRozan next season. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I personally just think that, the steadiness of Jakob Poeltl and DeMar DeRozan Jakob Poeltl hasn't said that he hates San Antonio. Whether he did say that or not, I will say, we've all said at least one point in our lives, no matter how much you love your job, you still say, "Oh, I hate it here." And he might have been taken out of context. He might have just been having a bad day. He might have, gone 20% from the field and San Antonio had a big loss. And then that agent heard it. And he's just like, yeah, he hates it there, man. He just hates it.
Or like they don't have his favorite restaurant or something, or like a certain type of food. And it's like, I hate San Antonio.
Yeah, it's meant to have good food, though. The barbecue apparently is meant to be out of sight. So, we know he's an LA native.
Yeah.
Maybe the Lakers try and do something funny.
I've seen some mock trades with Danny Green, and I want to say like Kyle Kuzma going to San Antonio for DeMar DeRozan. Doesn't help the Lakers spacing, I'll tell you that. And DeMar DeRozan, look at him. He's the opposite of a plug-and-play guy, given his skill set is so mid-range oriented. The three-point shot is not there. Obviously, he can play make for you, but I think Kory and I talked on this probably about like 30 episodes ago when we were during that hiatus, and how DeRozan is probably just more of like a six man at this point, or that'd be the best role for him unless he was in a system where, you know, the center could shoot threes, the four could shoot threes, the three could shoot threes, and the one could shoot threes, and he'd be the only guy not doing it. So I feel like it's just hard having a two guard that has the ball in his hands a lot and can't space the floor.
Yeah, yep. we saw some good stuff from DeRozan as well. Like, you know, this is like a perfect example of a guy whose like numbers don't necessarily make sense. Like, for example, he had the career high true shooting percentage of his career at 60.3. But then you look at his on-off numbers, and he was a negative on the court and a negative, and they were a negative when he was off the court as well. So the career year didn't necessarily translate to anything winning.
Spurs missed the playoffs for the first time in 20 years.
Right,
Yep.
Exactly. Also, you know, we did see a bump up in his assists per game while he's been with the Spurs, which is promising, I think, because he's been asked to do a little bit more while also playing, you know, out of position. He's been a shooting guard his entire career. As you guys mentioned, he spent, you know, 70% of the time playing small forward this year, 30% of the time playing power forward this year, which is different. And I'm pulling out all these stats I don't ever use. I don't know what's going on anymore. I don't know who I am.
I will say the positional B-ball reference stats are very iffy.
Are they? They kind of look a little iffy. But again, DeRozan's a great mid-range scorer. I feel like DeRozan, you know, as you guys mentioned, if you're trying to build a team that's going to compete now and be a very good team in winning basketball nowadays, he just doesn't fit the game plan. Like, he would make sense on a team like the Orlando Magic, who need someone to provide their own offense. The Charlotte Hornets, who might be looking for someone to provide their own offense. Maybe the Detroit Pistons, who might need a shot creator. Like, DeRozan's role now is as a shot creator on a second-tier team, not on a first-tier team. Because we saw what happened when he was, you know, the number one, number two option for the Toronto Raptors all those years. They couldn't get past a team with better number one option scoring-wise. So DeRozan's an interesting case because, again, he's entering the prime of his career, but he's probably not going to get much better without a consistent jump shot.
And he's not an amazing defender either. You know,
right.
I think that if you were a great defender and you can't shoot threes and you have all these other tools, sure. Like, DeRozan does a lot of things good. Like, don't get me wrong. He's one of the best mid-range scorers in the NBA, can finish inside. You know, Kory mentioned the playmaking improving and just that offensive pop he provides you and can score for himself. It's just the lack of impact on other aspects of the game. Then also, like, how much does he raise your ceiling? And I'm not sure he does that a ton. And that's what kind of concerns you. We have him at number 3 just because he's so talented, but the amount of teams that you would be like, oh, they get DeMar DeRozan, they're contenders, or now they're the best team in the league. Like, I'm not sure there's many scenarios, if any, that you think that.
Right. And also, you know, more stats. He was 73% finishing around the rim this year, a career best, and, you know, still shot above 47% from the mid-range.
Yeah.
He's an awesome driver of the basketball.
Yeah. He knows what he has to do. Like, he knows what he's good at, and he doesn't try to do other things. That's why he doesn't shoot threes. He knows that he's not a good three-point shooter. It's just not going to happen. Some people just don't have that skill. But moving on to number 2, you know, DeMar DeRozan, former Toronto Raptor, now current Toronto Raptor, which might change. Fred VanVleet, a guy who's really popped off the last 2 seasons, had another nice postseason. Maybe not as good as last year, but still, he took some major strides in his game this year to show what he can do, and it wasn't kind of a shot in the pan last year.
The opposing team, I wonder what Fred VanVleet is going to value. And I wonder how other teams will value Fred VanVleet.
Where do we think he sits in terms of, like, your roster? Is he your second option, third option, starting point guard? Like, where does he fit on a championship team, Jack?
He can be, depending on the talent level around him. You know, he got a Finals MVP vote a couple of years ago, but I don't think...
That's because of baby making.
Yeah, exactly. I think in that system, he was the third, fourth guy. You know, you had Kawhi Leonard, you had Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry, and you had Fred VanVleet and Serge Ibaka / Marc Gasol. So there, he's your fourth option on a championship team. On a good team in terms of, like, you know, we talked about DeMar DeRozan. You know, he can be, you know, one of your better players, your second best player, and lift you to, you know, a decent enough win percentage, you know, maybe the 500 sort of mark. I'm not saying that would be the case if he were to go to, like, the Knicks. He would transform things, but he would be the best point guard they've had since, I don't know, Jarrett Jack or Pablo Prigioni. He's a floor raiser more than DeMar DeRozan is because he can play a bit more defense. He's a really good three-point shooter. He can create. He's a prototypically well-rounded point guard on both ends of the floor, which is rare to say. A lot of point guards have negativities on one end or the other, and deficiencies on one end or the other. You're like Eric Bledsoe, where you're just all defense and no offense, or you're Derrick Rose and you're all offense and no defense. Lou Williams, those sort of guys. Whereas Fred VanVleet is the perfect sort of middle ground. I don't think he is great on either end. I think he did struggle a little bit in the postseason to find his own shot. He would be streaky and a bit of a flamethrower at times. Like, he'll win you some playoff games, but there's some other times where it's just like, Freddie, my guy, don't take that shot, my dude. But he'll get anything up to $25 million, and I think the least he'll get is 17, 18.
I mean, Fred VanVleet he can be a starting point guard in the NBA without a doubt. Now, the level that team's actually competing for and what their playoff seed looks like, their ceiling, that's up for grabs depending on the supporting cast around them. Now, granted, he's been in a great defensive system with the Toronto Raptors. And like you mentioned, Jack, it was really noticeable against the Celtics. He takes a lot of shots. He's got, some overly confidence moments, and, he's earned that right because he obviously had a huge run last year in the playoffs, ended in an NBA title. Again, I think Fred VanVleet doesn't end up back in Toronto. I see him getting a big pay grade and going elsewhere unless Toronto gets creative and really feels like they should keep Fred VanVleet. I think, again, I think he's probably going to get overpaid because, as you mentioned, Jack, I think offensively he's streaky, where I could see him be again, only 40% from the field, 39% from three. So it's worrisome that when a guy like that, his offense is so predicated on the jump shot from three and doesn't necessarily have the ability to get to the rim efficiently or hit the mid-range. Of course, the dying breed, the mid-range anyways. But I think that's somewhat problematic. And again, I think Fred VanVleet is slightly overhyped, even though I think he's a very good basketball player. But I think on most teams, he's better suited as your sixth man, whereas he's about to get paid and play big-time starter minutes and be expected to do way more than he's probably capable of. But hopefully he proves me wrong.
I think that he's okay being your starter. I think he has to play off of stars. Like, he has to be your third option. Go ahead, Kory. I know you got something to say.
On the Clippers,
yeah,
he would be the point guard they are dying for.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be great in the Lakers. Any team that really has, like, two stars that isn't one of your point guards, you know what I mean? Like, he wouldn't probably be a great fit on the Blazers or the Nets because they have Kyrie and then they have Dame. So, like, but if it's a system where you have two great forwards, like you mentioned, Paul George and Kawhi, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Fred VanVleet is almost a perfect fit because he gives you all those different aspects of a point guard game while still being a really good three-point shooter. Yeah, he had to put up some bad shots against Boston. I think some of that, though, is just like Toronto's offense was just trash that series. They had just some real issues creating offense. If he's able to play off other guys, then I think he'd be a little bit more successful where they're taking some of the pressure off him, taking some of the attention away, and he can be more one of those complementary guys. I think ideally, if he's like your fourth best player or your fifth best player, you feel good about that. If he's your third best player, you better have Anthony Davis or LeBron James. You better have two superstars so he can kind of play off of them.
Now, is he going to get the max?
No, I don't think so, but I've seen weirder things happen. I think the Knicks are going to offer him a big deal. And that's what the Knicks should really do because, to be honest, if they overpay him, it's not the end of the world because they're not going to be relevant for the next couple of years anyways. You know what I mean? Right. They're not going to be contenders. Sign him to a big 3-year deal. By the time that deal is up, you're in a good spot.
It also would help having some sort of championship experience on that young roster next to
competence point guard play. Like they haven't had
100%, yeah.
Like and I'm not trying to take shots at the Knicks, but they've just had a ton of young point guards that really don't understand how to play that position yet. The best thing they've had over the last couple seasons is Elfrid Payton. And, like, he's a backup point guard. He's not anything too crazy. So VanVleet could really stabilize things there. It's, in my eyes, it's almost between the Raptors and the Knicks. I'm not sure if there's, like, a third team that comes to mind that has the cap space to make a move for him.
Detroit, I think.
Yeah, former Dwayne Casey, former head coach. They have a good relationship, rumor is.
Yep.
And maybe Atlanta, just to, I actually think that is a good fit. If you're looking at
it would
offense.
Make me scared with two undersized guards.
But Fred VanVleet, just because he's undersized, plays really good defense and can guard ones and twos. It's like Kyle Lowry's like 5'11", Chris Paul's 5'11", 5'10", even though it says he's 6'1". He's still an above average defender on that side of the floor and can cover some of the deficiencies of Trae Young. Obviously, doesn't necessarily fit a timeline. Whether they're obviously invested in a Trae Young, in a Kevin Huerter as well. But Kevin Huerter I thought he had a good season. I just think that, Trae Young was sort of saying, I want to win now. Let's blah, blah, blah. Let's make these moves. If you want to do that, a move, a splashy move, throwing out the cash for a guy like Freddie VanVleet isn't the worst thing in the world.
If Dallas or Orlando could find money, he would also fit them, I feel like.
Yeah, I think Dallas is going to look to hold on to their money for next year, obviously.
Yeah.
Hoping for the Greek Freak. Orlando, if they could come up with some money, he'd probably be a nice fit next to Fultz, because Fultz is a little bit bigger than your average point guard, so that could kind of help. There'd be a ton of teams that would like to make a move for him. It's just his number is only going to be attainable by a few teams.
For sure.
But any other thoughts on VanVleet?
I just really like the story. Guy goes undrafted, and now we're talking about him possibly earning a max contract. It is awesome. These are the sort of stories that we love about sports. Guys just grinding from nothing to turning themselves into multi-millionaires. It's awesome, and he deserves all of it.
And it's a lot of just hard work, because we mentioned it. He's not a big guard. He's not a great athlete. He just works extremely hard, very skilled.
He has babies.
Yeah, and he has babies, and that just gives you that overall boost in your rating. So whatever
maybe,
it does.
Nick, maybe that'll help you churn out 8 podcasts a day if you do that yourself, mate.
Maybe. You guys might have to join the fun. You got to join the fun, Jack. If I'm having a baby, you're having a baby. You're a little older than me, too, so you got to do it.
Age isn't a restriction, my guy. Age isn't a restriction.
I'm a bachelor. I'm staying single. Y'all have this discussion. Let me know.
All right, moving on to number 1, Anthony Davis, the free agent on this list that is not going anywhere. We just have to talk about him because he does have a player option, which he'll decline, but then re-sign with the Lakers. We're talking about one of the best players in the NBA. Not sure exactly where he sits in terms of top 5 or top 3 or top 7, wherever you want to put him. I definitely have a little bit more question marks if he could be your best player on a championship team. But AD came up big when the Lakers needed him too, and obviously playing next to LeBron showcased the best of his ability.
What about the Chicago Bulls? No, I mean,
what about the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, I mean, he's mates with Kyrie. Let's get taken. Let's get some clicks. The thing that's most obviously you mentioned, Nick, getting a bit like a list that I shared with Kory about top 10 players done by Ben Taylor of Thinking Basketball had him as the second best player in the NBA. No. Now I think and it was the analytics that was analyzed, and I mean our guy Kory Waldron probably got 80% from field goal of 0.8% feet to 3 feet or whatever the heck it is. I don't know, numbers, blah, blah, blah. What a nerd. But in say that, I think Anthony Davis is a top 5 player. The best, you can quite easily say the best second star in the league maybe ever. LeBron's best teammate ever. And also, LeBron did say it was his team. We've heard comments today. It's like, he said, I'm the best player. He said, I'm the best player. Next season, maybe we do see that transition. I think the contract situation is, Anthony Davis is now in the realm of Giannis, LeBron, Kawhi, these guys that can dictate their contract terms to teams. Yeah. I'm going to go 1+1s. I'm going to do 2+1s. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to earn max money. And if he does do a 2+1 with the player option, he can then get the super duper duper max after having 10 years service in the NBA.
You didn't say Kevin Durant in that little listing of yours, did you?
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Kevin Durant. Man, I thought this was a Nets fan. I don't know. This is interesting.
Kick him off the show, Kory.
So I agree. I think when you're talking about top 5 players, Anthony Davis proved to me that he's more valuable than James Harden come playoff time. Maybe not regular season wise, but if I'm looking at the top 5 players in the NBA, I take Anthony Davis over James Harden. There's probably an argument for Stephen Curry still. We're going to see Stephen Curry after, not seeing almost all of last season, so he's probably going to get back in the race. But I think it's those forwards you mentioned, LeBron, Durant, Kawhi, Giannis, and then Davis. Obviously Anthony Davis, I think you're right, Nick. I don't think he can be your best player on a championship team, which isn't a bad thing. Because I just think you need someone who can, facilitate a little bit more, can do a little bit more with the basketball than a guy like Davis, who at times, we see some of his limitations. And as we mentioned on all of those, recaps that we did, there are quarters where Anthony Davis is just not felt on the basketball court still, despite how good he is and how much he impacts the floor on both ends. But there are still these moments in drought where you're like, where's Davis? Or why is Davis not being aggressive? And I think that's what holds him back from being that clear-cut, number 1 option on a championship team. But again, he was fantastic. That That game-winning shot against Denver really sticks out in my mind. Him yelling Kobe after. He was an animal, 75% around the rim this year, very good around the rim. 43% on corner threes. Davis also expanding and becoming more confident in taking jump shots has probably been the best added element
to his game.
Added element to his game. That's a simple way to put it. Yeah. He's fantastic. Definitely not going anywhere. Obviously, he'll be with the Lakers long term.
Yeah, and I'll clarify what I meant. He can be your best player in a championship team. He just can't be your lead option. You need somebody else. Where at some point LeBron's not going to be the best player in the NBA. At least most likely scenario. He might move down to number 6 or number 7, but he'll still set things up for Anthony Davis because Anthony Davis just has a little bit of an issue creating for himself, which is so weird for a guy that's so talented that you think it'd be a little bit easier for him to kind of create his own offense in terms of setting up things. But a lot of times we see him get into the post. He doesn't necessarily throw a post move. He'll just kind of settle for a mid-range fadeaway, which isn't terrible because he hits them at a high rate. But I think there's just some question marks about him kind of taking that next step. And the crazy thing about Anthony Davis is there's still plenty of time for him to get better and maybe even be the best player in the NBA. I'm not sure it's a definite fact that he's not going to be able to get there. There's a chance. It's kind of 50-50 at this point. I don't know how I feel. I remember when Anthony Davis was drafted and we were talking about him possibly being maybe the best player ever, the best big ever. There's still time for that to happen, but there's still some question marks that I'd like to have answered maybe next season. And maybe tougher opponents too. We didn't really see anybody have to challenge Anthony Davis because Kory mentioned this earlier. Bam Adebayo was not healthy for the finals. If he has to match up against another elite big, yeah, Jokic is great, but we know that he doesn't really play a lick of defense. So if he has to go maybe against Antetokounmpo or somebody like that, it's a little bit more challenging and we can kind of gauge him a little bit better. I don't think he's the second best player in the NBA.
No.
Neither do I. I think that is the fatal flaw in his game. And, I remember, crowding around the little table in Nick's room talking about him and the legacy he can leave. Yeah. We chatted about it on JBT as well. There's people throwing around the stuff that, that he's better than Tim Duncan already. And it's just does anyone watch basketball past 2008? Or it's just a fallacy to just forget how good the likes of Dirk, KG, Anthony Davis were. These are all-timers that have transformed the position. And without them, we don't see Anthony Davis do what he does now. He might have the most versatile skill set of any player in the NBA. But like you said, Nick, he can't be a self-creator just yet. That is a fatal flaw. And that might be the number one skill that stops you from being the best player in the NBA. Yeah, Kevin Durant does it, Steph Curry does it, James Harden does it, LeBron James does it. And if I missed any other players, Giannis doesn't do it. Anthony Davis doesn't do it.
Giannis probably does it better at a higher level than Anthony Davis probably does, to be honest.
Not really efficient, though. He just does it through pure physicality. He doesn't do it in a creative sort of, I'm not going to be like James Harden, say he doesn't have any skill, but it's not as skillful as the likes of, Stephen Curry and Kevin Durant and those sort of guys.
I think the one thing that drives me nuts with this Anthony Davis and LeBron James talk, it's only one of these things can be true. LeBron James is the best player in the NBA, then Anthony Davis can't be the second best player in the NBA because that's just not how it works. If that player is that good on your team, he's making the other player's life that much easier. There has to be some, hey, if I'm playing with him, my life is easier. If I'm not playing with him, my life is harder. And I think the on-off numbers for the Lakers with LeBron and Anthony Davis kind of showcase that. They're better together, but that's because they're helping each other play to the best of their ability. You know what I mean? If you have LeBron, you're going to be a better player. And if LeBron has Anthony Davis, he's probably going to be a better player because of that avenue and the attention that he's going to get.
Yeah, it's whenever I'm on a podcast, I'm the best podcaster ever. And whenever Kory's on, he becomes the second best podcaster because I lift his levels. Remembering The Office, The Outlet, whenever he's on JBT, whenever I guest on Full Access.
He's never been on JBT, have you?
No.
I don't think he has. The time we record at 12 p.m. your time. He's in bed getting that beauty sleep to make his hair look pretty and make that face look pretty. He's a good-looking guy. We can give him that. But I lift people whenever I'm on a podcast. Nick Fay, now that's that's questionable. I think we're on the same. It's LeBron and Kawhi if they were ever on the same team. It's MJ and LeBron if they were ever on the same team
so
together.
I'm Scott Burrell all of a sudden.
Yeah, you're Tony Kukoc. You're better than that, mate. You're better than that.
But any other thoughts on Anthony Davis? Obviously not that exciting given that he's number one on our list, but he's not going to go anywhere.
Again, I think the contract, being with Clutch Sports, Rich Paul maximizes what his clients get, at least.
Good friend of LeBron James who understands how to work the contracts.
Absolutely, and obviously, there's been mistakes made along the way, as was pointed out by agents in the Athletic piece. But for the most part, Tristan Thompson, LeBron James, all this, Nerlens Noel got an offer and he rejected it, whether that was on Nerlens Noel or whether that was on Rich Paul and Clutch Sports. But Anthony Davis is going to do everything to maximize the amount of money that he can get for his career. And obviously, in the current salary cap, it's likely to stay the same at around $109 million rather than go up as was previously expected before the pandemic hit. So for me, like I said, I think it's at least this is from what research I've done. It's 2 years until he has 10 years of service in the NBA. And once you're at that point, you get the super duper duper max. You get that big splash swimming in bathtub money. And that's what I think. And Anthony Davis deserves that. He deserves that. And he obviously got the massive deal in New Orleans as well. He's one of the best players in the NBA. Maximize the money that you can get Anthony Davis as one of the most promising young players in the NBA. And, it's a shock to say that. He's still only like 27, 28. He's got plenty of years left in him where he might take the mantle of LeBron next season. Who knows?
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, Anthony Davis, I think this is brought up on the podcast I was listening to. I can't remember if it was Brian Windhorst or Zach Lowe or somebody, and they were saying like Anthony Davis is in the range where he can afford to do those +1 contracts, is because if he were to tear his ACL, tear his Achilles, knock on wood, he would still
Kevin Durant did it.
Yeah, you would still end up getting a max deal later on. People are going to sign you because you're that talented, you're that good of a player. So, any other notes on Anthony Davis or any of the other top 25 unrestricted free agents?
Anthony Davis will be Defensive Player of the Year next season.
That's the mildest hot take I've ever heard.
Yeah, he finished second.
I was like you were brewing, you were building. I'm like, man, Kory's gonna finish with something. There's gonna be some spice. Hot take marathon. We're opening with that article. Anthony Davis going to win the Defensive Player of the Year.
Mild fries.
I mean, in terms of the spices that you enjoy on, like, your chicken and your meats and stuff, no spice at all. So it's like
I'm not a spicy guy.
I just bought new hot sauce today. I bought some Jamaican hot sauce. I'm mad excited to use it.
If Nick brings takes, he's bringing the Jamaican hot takes apparently.
I don't know where Nick is, but this guy. I don't know what corner he's in right now, but this guy.
You had it right at first. I mean, you should be able to figure it out, but But any other thoughts on the unrestricted free agent list? Obviously, we went through the top 25. Any guys where you were like, shit, we kind of screwed that up?
There's a T-shirt that I'm wearing. I'm not sure everyone who is listening to this on a podcast right now might be like, what the hell is he doing right now? Holding up my Joe Harris T-shirt that I wear consistently. Number one in my heart.
Since he got it.
Probably not. But we don't need to talk about my hygiene issues on this podcast. But I think that you can make an argument for a lot of guys being higher. The key theme is like, what can you do in the postseason when it matters the most? What are your weaknesses, and how much do those weaknesses affect your payday and your fit in whatever team has any semblance of contractual and salary cap space? Obviously, this is a much weaker market, and it's there aren't many guys. There aren't many teams who have that salary cap space, and the teams that do are the big markets. And we could see surprises. But I don't think we'll see. Maybe the surprises will probably be as surprising as the hot takes that Kory Waldron brings to this podcast.
I think we'll see more trades. I think because there's less cap space, players want to get moved, sign-in trades are going to happen, things like that. And I think, if we maybe redid this unrestricted free agent list, I would maybe be open to tiers, because we saw that with the athletic rankings. No, I just think it's a little bit easier. And then also, given that we don't have stars in this free agent class, it's so role player based that almost so many of these free agents are, hey, where do you fit best? Like, who needs that skill set? So it'd be easy to take somebody who's like, let's say 21 Aaron Baines, who you brought up on a previous show, Jack, and how you'd want to take him over Andre Drummond. That's something that's feasible in the right situation. And I would say the same thing about Joe Harris, maybe over some of the guys we talked about, today or on the last show. Or you could even argue that maybe, Kory said, he wouldn't really want Montrezl Harrell. He'd rather have, who was it, Kory? Serge Ibaka.
Well, Serge Ibaka or Jeremy Grant,
yeah. So that would be somebody that, like, makes sense. Like, for the Nets, Jack, we would prefer Serge Ibaka. We would prefer Grant over Montrezl Harrell. Montrezl Harrell probably wouldn't even make my list, to be honest. And that's not disrespectful to his game.
I got a hot take. I would rather have Tristan Thompson than Montrezl Harrell as my starting center.
That's a better. Okay, you bring in some more spice. It's taking you.
Well, one of them is actually a center.
True.
You know what I
Sure.
mean? Montrezl Harrell just isn't. He just like it's hard to be that undersized.
One's also an NBA champion.
Ooh.
And one also has the Kardashian curse. Ooh.
And he's freed now, right? Oh no, he's not.
Nah, they're back. They're back. Even though he was doing it.
Oh, they're together. Oh, that's good. That's good.
He was doing it dirty.
It's like getting Lyme disease. That shit never goes away.
Shout out to Chloe. Wow, my God. Wow, we're ending a podcast with a Lyme disease take joke. Wow.
Zinger. That's a zinger.
But all right, guys. Anything else? Obviously, we're going to do the top 5 restricted free agents. But any other thoughts on free agency or anything like that? And we got the news that it looks like the NBA will be back sooner than expected.
Yeah,
miracle.
Yeah, we're going to have to be doing the content. I don't know what Kory's doing right now. You got to come back to the podcast, guy. We're not over yet. You got to do your closing signature thing. And if you're not back by then I'm going to just steal it from you.
Jack, on this episode, all right, you can get you out on all streaming platforms.
He's on Douglas.